Star Wars The Last Jedi had a lot of hype around it. The Force Awakens set the groundwork for a new Star Wars trilogy, and there are elements to it that I really like. But it also had a bunch of flaws that are hard to overlook. Plus, let's be honest, The Force Awakens was a gateway film. It had to be an homage to the old films while also setting up new characters. They were taking big risks, so they also stuck closely to what worked in the original trilogy. Really, these movies have such a tightrope to walk. They're either too far a departure from the first trilogy, or they're rip-offs, and any creative decision they make is either brilliant or awful. We, the audience, give these movies very little room for error, which is all the more reason why I'm so impressed with The Last Jedi. It is one of the very best Star Wars movies ever made, right up there with the films of the original trilogy, and I dare say it might even be just behind Episode 5. Sure, this movie is not perfect, but neither were any of the films of the original trilogy. This was the kind of space opera that we have been waiting years to get. It has everything a Star Wars fan of almost any age could want. We get epic action scenes, we get great music and locations, an incredible amount of character development, and yes, there's the obligatory cutesy animal for marketing, but I accepted the Ewoks, so I'm not going to complain too loudly about the Porgs. Are they called Porgs? I can't remember. Anyway, the story picks up where Force Awakens left off. The Resistance is being hunted by the First Order, while Rey finds Luke Skywalker on his lonely retreat. Some of this film is predictable. The rebels are being chased across the galaxy by the First Order, Supreme Leader Snoke wants to turn Rey to the dark side, Kylo Ren has conflicting feelings about his position, and Rey is given lessons by Luke. But honestly, I was genuinely impressed by the number of twists we ended up getting from this film. I could not predict where the story was going, because nothing turns out quite how you expect. They also did a good job raising the stakes as the movie went along, and by the end we had a cliffhanger ending that was still also its own ending. Before I continue my praises, though, I will admit to the flaws this movie has. Some things do happen just for the sake of story, like Finn suddenly being able to fly a ship perfectly when he couldn't in the first film. Other small things like that, basically. A bigger issue, though, is the fact that apart from Kylo Ren and Captain Phasma, the villains, they stumbled in this film. Their portrayal, I mean. General Hux was a genuinely intimidating guy and an interesting character in the first film. His speech from The Force Awakens is one of that movie's highlights. And then in this film, he's mostly just comic relief. Also, Snoke doesn't get the big explanation I was hoping for when he was first introduced. Maybe he'll get one in the 9th, but overall he feels way too much like a retread of the Emperor. But going back to what this movie did right, there was a level of ambiguity that Star Wars has rarely ever done before. Luke isn't the shining beacon of hope that he was held up to be. He actually took an action that wasn't just incredibly dark, but it led to the destruction of the new Jedi in the first place. I won't say what exactly it is, but I was genuinely impressed. They had a really interesting conflict inside of Luke that he would have to genuinely regret for the rest of his life. And then there's this shady hacker played by Benicio del Toro. He didn't have that much to do. I thought it was a bit of a waste of such a great actor as del Toro, but he did provide a surprising revelation to two of the main characters about the First Order and the Resistance. It actually did a surprising amount of world building to the Star Wars universe. What I really liked, though, was the character development. Finn, Kylo, Rey, and Poe all get satisfying arcs to their characters in the story. All of them progress and change in natural ways to what happens in the film. Poe was one of the least interesting parts of The Force Awakens, and in The Last Jedi, he's one of the most dynamic characters. We also get two new main characters, Admiral Holdo and Rose. Rose is Finn's partner in the film when they're both sent on a secret mission. Aside from losing her sister in the opening battle, Rose also has a pretty tragic backstory that I won't go into here. Meanwhile, Admiral Holdo is a pretty good foil to Poe, and they butt heads over how to deal with the First Order. Again, I'm not going to go too deeply into it, but I really liked how their conflict was resolved. It led to Poe realizing his mistakes, while Holdo is forced into a situation where she ends up taking an action that Poe would have done if he had had to make the decision. Both influenced the other with their viewpoints, and thus they both grew as characters. And really, this is the kind of thing that puts Last Jedi above any flaws it might have. The writing went out of its way to develop these characters and justify their existences. And aside from what I can only describe as a really random time for Leia to embrace her Force powers, we ended up getting great roles for Luke and Leia to play in the film. Sadly, Chewbacca, C-3PO, and R2-D2 fade into the background most of the time, but I mean, we can't have everything, guys. They're supporting characters in the original trilogy, they're supporting characters here. I mean, we take what we can get. In any case, Last Jedi was a huge improvement over Force Awakens. It's easily on par with the original trilogy. I know a lot of people have their issues with the film, but me personally, I was blown away by the incredible story which balanced so many good characters on a literal intergalactic scale. That's the kind of stuff that brought us to Star Wars in the first place.